Hello.
Hey, how
Hey
are you?
Shane,
What up?
doing fine.
Cool.
Yeah, quick 1 hour session today.
Yep.
I've been I did a couple different passages for physics related passages that I just want to continue going over with you. So
Okay.
yeah, we can start. Um, let me share. You see it now?
hmm
Okay, great. Okay. Should I read it or you?
You can read it.
Okay, cool. So, diving physics is the study of factors which affect divers and their equipment. The primary factors at play are the extent to which a diver is immersed in water, called hydrostatic pressure, and the effects of pressure on the gases carried within the diver's scuba tank. There are several laws of physics which are crucial for divers to understand. Archimedes' principle is important for predicting how an object immersed in fluid will be buoyed up by buoyant force. Okay. Divers need to understand buoyancy to safely operate their dry suits, weighting systems, and lifting bags. Henry's law is useful for understanding decompression sickness. During decompression sickness, rapid fluctuations in blood nitrogen gas concentrations during a diver's ascent result in the formation of nitrogen gas bubbles that may cause fatigue and nausea. Divers should also be aware of the differences in visibility while underwater. During deeper dives, water will appear bluish green, requiring divers to bring their own artificial light sources. Also of note are the environmental factors at play during diving. At estuaries where fresh water meets the ocean, the two bodies may not immediately mix, resulting in a vertical salinity gradients termed haloclines, wherein water is layered on top of salt water. Similarly, thermoclines, figure 1, are areas of steep vertical temperature gradients formed due to their air temperature being greater than water temperature and only warming shallow water.
Okay. Um, and what do you see in this figure?
Just like basically it shows depth beneath the ocean. Um, I didn't really understand what like the thermoclines were, but
So you could see in our x-axis has the change in temperature, and so we can see as we get deeper, we have a drop in temperature, right?
yes.
Okay.
So that's just what it is.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
All right. So for this question, um, what are your thoughts?
So I think um I just like common sense wise limited B,
Okay.
and then I think D was also wrong just because it just normally is important to make stops while you're sending. I don't
Mhm.
know, it's also kind of common sense. Like you just gotta like s stop every so often. You can't have too much of a change in temperature, like quick temperature, else that can like pop your ears or whatever or something. Anyway, so I eliminated B and D. Um, and so then uh
So, according to the passage, what do they say decompression sickness is caused by?
like uh blood nitrogen gas concentration.
Yeah, rapid fluctuations in blood nitrogen gas concentration, right?
Mm-hmm.
During the ascent. So
Yeah.
that is what causes it. So if we want to reduce that, we want to choose an answer choice that would be like less of a rapid fluctuation in blood nitrogen.
Okay. So then A.
Yeah. If you decrease the partial pressure of nitrogen in the scuba tank, that reduces the nitrogen gas concentration in your blood. Um, and you should have less of a rapid fluctuation, and that would make sense.
Okay. Um, so yeah, said water is bluish green.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, I know it's Roy G. Biv. Violet has the shortest wavelength,
Mm-hmm.
uh, right?
Mm-hmm.
Highest frequency.
Mm-hmm.
So Roy G. Biv,
Uh-huh.
Roy G. Biv. So it would be like somewhere in the middle. That's why, yeah, I got this
So
wrong.
we want to be aware of the difference in absorption and what color something may appear to be,
Oh, okay.
because it's complementary, right? Like this color wheel shows that if something appears blue, it means it's absorbed the stuff that isn't blue.
Got it.
So now blue, we can just associate that with being like, the lower wavelength end. And, that means that it's going to absorb stuff that's of a higher wavelength. So yeah, it'll likely be the highest wavelength here.
Why are you saying blue is the lowest wavelength?
I mean, it's on the low side. I mean, it's not as low as indigo and violet, but you know, it, I guess it's easier to compare um red to blue. But yeah, it'll still be like on the lower end of the, you know, spectrum in terms of the wavelength. So, but mostly what they're testing here is just, if something appears to be a certain color, then it means that it's absorbing other colors. So if something appears bluish green, it means that the blue part is absorbed, uh, or something appears blue when orange is absorbed, and something appears green if red is absorbed. So, and we know red is going to be like, the highest wavelength, the longest wavelength. So, yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
This is just like knowing it.
Yeah,
Uh,
so like be able to draw the Roy G. Biv color wheel like this for complementary colors. So that just shows that, the complementary color to blue is orange, complementary color to green is red. So if something appears red, it'll be absorbing green. If something appears green, it's absorbing red.
mhm. Okay. Next is this, and honestly, I wanted to go over all four with you.
Okay.
So, yeah, all four of
So
these responses.
yeah, so reflection is exactly what you think. And typically the angle of incidence is equal to oops, the angle of reflection. And that's when you just have some light that does not enter into a medium, but gets like bounces off of a medium. That's reflection. Dispersion is when, so like an example is chromatic dispersion. If you have like some prism and you have white light going in, it will disperse into the different colors, Roy G. Biv, like the Pink Floyd, album cover.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the chromatic dispersion. So think of it as like spreading out the colors that are contained inside white light. Um, and then refraction is when the light actually enters into a new medium. So like if this is N1 and this is N2 and N2 is greater than N1, aka if the light is entering into a more dense medium, it will bend towards the normal, which is, this dotted line that's perpendicular to the interface between the two media. So this will give you like a smaller angle compared to the angle of incidence. And that's refraction when it bends as it enters a new medium. Um, and then absorption is when, it something can absorb some type of color or some type of light. And we kind of saw that with the previous question about if something looks to be a certain color, it means that it's absorbing that complementary color.
Okay, and does reflection and refraction sometimes happen like at the same time?
Yep. So typically you're going to have them happening at the same time. The so like here we have reflection and refraction happening at the same time. Um, but if you go from, the more dense medium into the less dense medium, like let's say that this is our incident ray. Um, and okay, let's say that we're at our critical angle. That means that you're going to get 90 degrees refraction here, which means it's 100% refraction if it's like along that interface, and 0% reflection. And then if you go like beyond this critical angle, it then turns into total internal reflection where none of it gets refracted, but it all gets reflected. So those are the two scenarios where it's just going to be either refraction or reflection, but every other scenario will have both reflection and refraction.
How do you know that it like touched the critical angle? It, how do
Yeah,
you know when it reflects the critical angle or like refracts, I mean?
yeah. So if this angle is 90 degrees,
Oh,
so if you use Snell's law, which is n1, sine 1, sine of theta 1 is equal to n2 sine of theta 2. If theta is 90 degrees, sine of 90 degrees, we know is 1. So that's when you'd have like n1 sine theta 1 is equal to just n2.
okay.
So yeah, if your refracted angle of refraction is 90 degrees, that's when like this angle is called the critical angle.
Okay. So would the answer here be refraction?
Let's see. In addition to the visibility of divers being limited, um, it is often difficult to see divers from above the surface of the ocean. These effects are most likely due to, um, okay, if you're above the surface, you can't really see divers who are below the surface, I guess. Um, and they said that divers should also be aware of the differences in visibility while underwater during deeper dives. Water will appear bluish green. Okay. Um, let's see. Okay. I think this is giving us an example of this scenario. Um, so so we should know that water would have a higher index of refraction than air. Um, and so if you are already underwater, um, if there's like a light ray like from underwater, uh, like outwards, like at the surface to enter into the air, you would need something that would refract into, so like if we had the water here and the air here, we should see, so like let's say this is a light ray from underwater, and then it enters, the air, you should be able to see that person. Um, but if it's this situation where it's total internal reflection, nothing, passes through. And if nothing like if no light ray from underwater passes through into the air, if you are above the surface of the ocean, aka in the air, you can't see things that are uh below the surface. So you're going to get your total internal reflection here. So that should be that right there.
Uh, So if they would be seen, then that would be refraction.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. And this is due to total internal reflection.
Reflection. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Second. All right. All
Uh,
right.
Divers carry soft equipment such as a buoyancy compensation device. Charles' law predicts during an ascent out of a thermocline, a diver will experience. Okay, so let's think about. All right, so if we don't know what Charles' law likely, if they're talking about it in the context of a thermocline, I think that's when you relate like temperature to something like maybe pressure or volume. But if we're talking about a buoyancy compensation device, it's like it has to compensate for buoyant force. So it can probably make you reduce, or rather, let's see, ascent out of a thermocline. Oh, okay. So if the a device is meant to compensate for buoyancy, it means that it's trying to compensate for something that's already that a buoyancy that's high. If we're talking about compensating for it, so that could have the so we could probably eliminate B and D. Um, and now for positive or negative feedback loop. Um, well, if it was a negative feedback loop, I guess you should have it like kind of fixing its own compensation without needing some compensation device. So it wouldn't be a negative feedback loop because that would, be like, okay, if we have an increase in buoyancy, it would cause a decrease in buoyancy. Um, but if you need this compensation device, then it's probably going to be a positive feedback loop that increases buoyancy.
Interesting. What's the po I didn't really understand the wording here. Like,
Mhm.
what exactly does it mean to be like a buoyancy compensation device?
Yeah, um, so if it's like a device that you need to compensate for buoyancy, it means that you're trying to negate the effects of buoyancy. So so that means that if you need it, you're going to have an increase in buoyancy, which is why you need that buoyancy compensation device.
To decrease
So,
it?
what's up?
To decrease it?
Hmm. Yeah. But the question is worded so that it tells you what you experience naturally, like without that compensation device. And so if you need a compensation device for buoyancy, it means that whatever you're doing is increasing buoyancy. That's why you need something to compensate for it.
Hmm.
And so we know that this ascent is going to result in increasing buoyancy. So we can get rid of B and D. And then if it's a negative feedback loop, it means that if something is causing an increase in buoyancy, it should tell itself to decrease that buoyancy because that's what happens in a negative feedback loop. Like if you have too much of something, it will tell itself, hey, we need to stop making this or doing this. Um, so if it was a negative feedback loop, then it would, if you're having an increase in buoyancy, it will cause a decrease in buoyancy. But since you need this buoyancy compensation device, it's not going to solve itself. So it wouldn't be a negative feedback loop. So like for instance, if your buoyancy is going up and you had a negative feedback loop like this, it means that it will send a signal to whatever is making the buoyancy go up to tell it to make the buoyancy go down. That's what you have in a negative feedback loop. But if it's a positive feedback loop, the increase in buoyancy should cause it to tell itself to increase the buoyancy even more.
So like realistically, B or C like intuitively makes sense, like just as answer choices, right? Like there'd be a decrease in buoyancy if it was a negative feedback loop. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Okay. But like here, obviously, because you're compensating with buoyancy, the buoyancy is increasing. So like,
Hmm.
okay. All right. Got it. Um, Yeah. It's nice because I mean in the explanation they talk about like Charles' law and like V over T equals V over T. But
Hmm.
you determine the answer just without even having to know Charles' law. So
Yeah, like, but if they since they said the thermocline thing, I know because like there's like there's like Boyle's law, Charles' law, there's like that other guy's law that all
yes.
combine to make the ideal gas law. And I I never liked how um like they can ask you questions that require you to know the difference between the three because ultimately you can just keep using the ideal gas law. So for this question, I was able to at least tell that Charles' law is like since they mentioned the thermocline, that it's probably relating like, the temperature to something, like either the pressure or the volume or something like that. Um, but yeah, for this question, since they mentioned the buoyancy compensation device, you know, that's what led me to think that it's going to cause increase in buoyancy and then positive feedback loop. Yeah.
Okay.
Consider a diver that can be modeled in terms of the combined mass of the diver and their equipment, M diver, and the density and volume of the gas in their scuba tank. So density of the gas, volume of the gas. Um, and I mean, right away, I'm thinking uh, rho gas times V gas should equal, well, it'll equal the mass of the diver. Well, wait, mass of the diver includes the equipment. So mass of the diver minus rho gas times V gas, which would be mass of the gas, would give you the mass of the diver only, I guess. So, okay. And the mass of fluid they are displacing, mass of the fluid, um, when the diver is ascending at constant velocity, which means, zero acceleration. Which of the following expressions is proportional to their mass? Okay. So, um, yeah. So I think, the rho gas. Okay. So if mass of the diver is mass of the diver plus the equipment, and then rho of the gas times volume of the gas is going to give you the mass of the gas. So let's see, when the diver is ascending at constant velocity, which of the following expressions is proportional to their mass? So I guess when they say their mass, they just mean the mass of the diver without the equipment, right? So
Yeah.
if this is the mass of the gas inside of the scuba tank, then mass of the actual diver, only the diver, not the equipment, should be mass of the diver minus rho gas, volume gas, and that would give you the mass of, just the diver alone. So for this question, I was just ready for equating mass to density of mass, density of the gas times volume of the gas. And that's something that you see in, Archimedes principle or the buoyant force when you have, you know, rho VG equal to mg, because rho is mass over volume. So if you do rho V, it's mass over volume times volume, which is just mass, right? That's like
Okay.
the fundamental thing for Archimedes law. So you want to be going in expecting to see, like, if since they give you rho, the density of the gas and the volume of the gas, you want to be able to think of that as if you multiply those two, you'll get mass.
Mhm.
Yep. Okay. Specific gravity is the density of something over the density of water.
Hmm.
And it ultimately gives you like, so like for Mercury, the specific gravity is 13, which means Mercury's density is 13 times as dense as water. So that's what specific gravity is. So let's see, consider the specific gravity of a diver to be relative to the fluid in which they are immediately submerged. Okay. When traveling within a halocline, so that's where they talk about the uh, salt, um, salin vertical salinity gradient halocline, wherein fresh water is layered on top of salt water. That makes sense because the salt water is more dense. Okay. Traveling within a halocline, where will the specific gravity of the diver be the lowest? Okay. So specific gravity is density of, let's see, density of, let's say, the diver over density of the water, but they're also saying
I mean,
relative fluid.
I got this one right, so I just want to
Mhm,
make sure I understand it. I like the answer is C,
mhm.
and it would just be at the bottom of the halocline because like I mean I'm just used to something like the more dense it is, the farther down it is, the lower it is, and like the higher specific gravity would have then, right?
Um, so for the specific gravity, I'm thinking about, so like what I wrote is technically the specific gravity, but they're saying it's relative to the fluid in which they're immediately submerged. So maybe they want us to think of it as perhaps the diver density over the diver or over the fluid, which I guess is still water ultimately, but we can differentiate the water being like salt water or fresh water. Um, and so, okay, if it's the lowest, we want the denominator to be larger. If we want the overall specific gravity to be lower, right?
Hmm.
Because we could see
Yeah.
that specific gravity is inversely proportional to the density of the fluid, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, so specific gravity of the diver will be lowest wherever the density of the fluid would be highest. And that, yeah, that should be at the bottom of the halocline because fresh water is less dense than salt water. So the lower we go, the more salt water we will be submerged in. And that will give you the lowest specific gravity because it would give you the highest density of the fluid, which is density of the salt water.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Okay. And next is this.
Okay.
The lungs facilitate gas exchange between circulation and the environment. Oxygen-rich air is inhaled through the mouth into the airway, which consists of bronchioles that branch into alveoli, sites of gas exchange. Most alveoli participate in gas exchange directly with the blood delivered to the lungs by the pulmonary capillaries. During inhalation, the diaphragm contracts and expands the lungs, resulting in an expansion of the alveoli, which the alveoli resists. During exhalation, the alveolar collapse is only prevented by surfactants that relieve alveolar surface tension. Effective gas exchange requires the alveoli to be ventilated and perfused. Almost low to max. Okay. While individual alveoli have variable degrees of ventilation, collective ventilation lung perfusion changes are measured using a ratio of total ventilation to total perfusion. Alveoli are supplied by mixed venous blood entering alveolar capillaries, which exit as arterial blood. The partial pressure of O2, right?
Uh-huh.
Pressure of O2 and pressure of CO2 of mixed venous blood are approximately 40 mmHg, while the PaO2 and PaCO2 of mixed arterial blood are approximately 65 and 35. The rate of diffusion of gas across the alveolar membrane, R diff, is described by Fick's law shown below. M is the diffusion coefficient for that particular gas across the membrane A. A is the surface area of the membrane. Delta P is the partial pressure gradient across the membrane. T is thickness. Okay. Once across the membrane, concentration of gas dissolved in the blood determined by Henry's law. Okay.
Okay. Let's see. The partial pressure of O2 and CO2 within an alveolus that has had its ventilation completely obstructed. Okay, they said the ventilation is when the gas must be able to enter and exit the alveoli from and to the external environment. Um, blood must, oh wait, sorry. Um, okay. And then collective ventilation and oh, that's also the perfusion thing. Okay. Enter and exit the alveoli from, okay, so okay, so um uh so the mixed venous blood is going to have 40-40 for partial pressure of O2 and partial pressure of CO2. And what happens is like CO2 can be like offloaded here and O2 can be loaded here into the blood. So that's why we see the O2 partial pressure go up from 40 to 65 and the CO2 to drop from 40 to 25.
Yeah.
Okay. But if the ventilation is completely obstructed, we should see, let's see. So A has a greater partial pressure of O2 compared to the CO2, which is in line with what we have here, which is if ventilation can happen, meaning, gas can enter and exit the alveoli. Um, so that seems to be consistent. Let's see, B 0 for O2 and 150 for CO2. Um, let's see. D is then the opposite. And then C is when it's kind of equal, but slightly more CO2. Um, ventilation obstructed. So if it's not able to, let's see, if it's not able to exchange gas from the alveoli to the external environment, then we wouldn't see, I guess, this type of gas exchange, and I guess that would mean hmm, like something should be closer to the original 40/40, perhaps.
Yeah. Okay. So because the ventilation is blocked off, like it's obstructed, that means that there can't really be much exchange happening at all. So it's just going to continue being the same, more or less. Partial pressure.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Which of the following shows the partial pressure of carbon dioxide within the pulmonary capillaries as blood travels from point A to point B? Point A, point B. So I know the carbon dioxide level decreases. I wasn't sure if it was A or B.
So this is a an example of what an inverse proportion looks like. Um, a lot of people would think that it looks like this because a direct proportion would look like that, and an exponential would look like that. So people think an inverse would look like this, but if it's an inverse proportion, that did not like if it's A is proportional to 1 over B, we cannot have that B be a zero, right?
Mhm.
Which means that, as A increases, like let's say if A is 2, this is 1 over 2. If it's 200, this is 1 over 200. So as A increases, B or 1 over B decreases, but it never hits zero. It just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So that's why you're going to have asymptotes at the axes, and you're going to get this hyperbolic shape. And that's what you have for an inverse proportion. They like to test that. Um, so that's why it's useful to do it like this. Because sometimes people say to like go like, all right, if A goes up, B goes down, something like that. But that doesn't help you with understanding what a graph of it would look like. But if you do it like this, then you can see how it would look like A.
Mhm.
So just know that an inverse proportion looks like a hyperbola and not like the straight line going down.
Yeah. So, I got this right, but I just want to go over it. So, it asks how does diaphragm produce inhalation, and the answer was A. So I know that like what I wanted to ask, like, what was the main difference between alveolar pressure and like intrapleural pressure again?
Oh yeah. Um, I guess the alveolar pressure is going to be the pressure in the actual lungs, but the intrapleural pressure is like that thing around it. Um, and let's see. So, and I think the intrapleural pressure just kind of maybe compensates for the change in alveolar pressure, which is like the lung pressure. Um, and so for inhalation, when the diaphragm contracts, it makes that like lung cavity larger, higher volume, and that produces a lower pressure, and that would result in inhalation because the inside of your lungs is a lower pressure than the outside, so you're going to inhale. Um, so yeah, so it's going to decrease the alveolar pressure. Um, but the increased intrapleural pressure, I think that's just going to be something that, just I guess would compensate for the lung pressure, but not something that actually causes um inhalation or exhalation.
Wait, repeat that?
Hmm. So, um, so yeah, you have like the lung pressure, which is the same thing as the alveolar pressure, and you have the intrapleural pressure, which is like the cavity like in between the lungs and outside of the lungs, and it pretty much works um to compensate the change in alveolar pressure, but it doesn't on its own cause either inhalation or exhalation. That is caused by a change in the alveolar or the lung pressure. So the intrapleural pressure doesn't really cause anything. Um, it's just like a side effect.
Got it.
And so choice D is a little bit relevant because something that you're expected to know is that exhalation, I think, is because of that elasticity. I think we did a passage on that before.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Exhalation is due to elasticity,
Um,
you
yeah,
said?
yeah. So yeah, because there was a passage that we did that talked about like a ventilator, and a ventilator can be used to help someone inhale, but it doesn't need to be used for that same person to exhale because the exhalation is just that elastic recoil of the um, expansion that happens during inhalation, and then contraction during exhalation. That contraction is just the elastic nature of it going back to its original size from being stretched out.
So exhalation is due to the elastic recoil.
Yeah, and remember that elastic, it's not exactly how we use it in how we use the word in normal life. Like people generally use elastic to mean flexible, but it really, physics terms, it means that something that, like, let's say something that's stretched can return to its original shape or length.
Hmm.
So when you're inhaling, you have your lung cavity expand and therefore stretch, and elastic needs to go back to its original size. So if it stretches from inhalation, it will return to its original size due to that elastic recoil, which is how exhalation happens. So,
Hmm.
yep.
Okay.
Um, yeah, the surfactant thing. Um, let's see. Suppose that the addition of surfactant to water disrupts both the adhesive and cohesive forces of the water, but disrupts the adhesive forces more than it disrupts the cohesive forces. Um, Which of the following shows how the addition of surfactant will most likely affect the meniscus of water in a glass capillary? Okay, we talked a little bit about this, I think, too, where, you know, if you have like a meniscus like this, there's stronger adhesive forces, which means there's stronger attraction between like the liquid and the wall of this like graduated cylinder.
Yep.
You had something that was more cohesive forces, meaning the liquid's going to have a stronger bond with itself than to the surroundings. It'll have a more convex meniscus.
Hmm.
So for this one, they're saying that, okay, the surfactant messes the adhesive forces more than it messes with the cohesive forces. So, well, okay. So I guess either, oh wait. Um, okay, let's see. Without the surfactant, it should be less adhesive forces, more cohesive forces. Let me see D.
Hmm?
Let me see D. Okay, let's see. Adhesive forces give it that this concave shape, and with surfactant, we should have less of the adhesive forces. So we should see it drop when you have the surfactant. So A sees it drop with no surfactant, which is not what we want. B has it, the lower one be no surfactant, which is not what we want. Um, so C and D at least have the no surfactant part higher up, because the higher up it is means that there's more adhesive forces, right?
But I don't understand, where does the water go if it drops?
So it's like more so to do with like the shape of this, but yeah, so for instance, let's see. With no surfactant, it should be at some water level. Um, but if you include the surfactant, you are decreasing the adhesive forces. So the adhesive forces are what gives it the shape as well as a higher water level, because it's like the stuff on the sides are sticking to the walls of the container. So we want to see something where, with no surfactant would give us a higher adhesive force than with the surfactant, which should give us a smaller adhesive force. So if there's less adhesion, it should be a lower water level because you have less. If you have a surfactant, you have less adhesive forces. So, like, let's see. Um, we had like whatever a graduated cylinder here, and you have this shape, which indicates adhesive forces, and we wanted to increase the adhesive forces. It would take on a more exaggerated concave shape like this. So it can be like that, where it's more exaggerated. And the more exaggerated it is, the higher it can get because it's attracted to the walls of the container. So the overall water level will be higher with the adhesive forces. So we know that the surfactant means less adhesive forces, so it should give you a smaller um, water level compared to with no surfactant.
But
Mhm.
the answer is D, and
Mhm.
the actual shape doesn't change of the meniscus.
Yeah, yeah. So initially, I thought we were going to see like a more fundamental difference, like this versus this, right? But that's more so like where on the right, it's like if the cohesive forces are stronger than the adhesive forces. Now, the adhesive forces both produce this type of concave shape as well as an increase in the water level because it's sticking to the sides like of this like graduated cylinder or this container that it's a part of. So you want to also think about like in addition to the changes in shape that you also have when you have adhesive forces, you have it sticking to the walls of the container, which gives it a higher um a higher level. Um so yeah, so you'll get a higher level of the water if you have more adhesive forces. So
Okay.
yeah, and if
But
surfactant means less adhesive forces, it would cause either some shape that's going to be uh more convex or a lower water level.
okay.
Mhm. Oh, that
Yeah.
flew.
Yep.
Yeah, that
Alrighty.
yeah. Okay, cool. So I'm seeing you on am I seeing you twice on Thursday?
Hey, you are. That's all that was left. I'm trying to get in all these
Uh-huh.
reviewing all these things before my friends come for the weekend. So I just want to make sure that
Got it.
I yeah do everything I need to do.
Awesome.
Thank you, Shane.
Yep.
Appreciate you. I'll see you Thursday.
All right, take care.